Writing master's thesis in English is about writing master's theses, for and foremost. In English comes next. Some of the questions you've asked, the how questions, are not only about English, they're about theses, whether they're in English, French, Turkish, or whatever, right? Or German. So I'd like to look at the big questions first. What students usually start with is what? What do I write about? What's my topic? What am I interested in? And I'm sure all of you have 3 or 4 ideas for the what, right? I think a good way of answering the what question is actually not to ask what, but to ask why. You knew it was coming, didn't you? yeah, right. To ask why. Why am I writing a master's thesis? Yeah? Because if you ask why, you'll find it a lot easier to answer the what. And there can be many reasons. One reason is you want to get an academic qualification. And so your choice of topic, your formulation of title, your academic style has to fit the institution you're working with. Right? Simple. That why question leads you to an answer. Different institutions will have different approaches. And the person to talk to about that is your supervisor. You have a thesis supervisor, and he or she can help you with that. The next question, the big question, and that's the question you've been asking is, of course, how? How do I write a master's thesis? If you can answer what and why, that should lead you pretty directly to how. Right? How is a question of method. And I'm not talking here specifically about time management. And you've got 4 months or 3 months in which to write it, and I'm doing a full-time job and I've got 6 kids. And how do I do it? That's not really what I'm talking about, although I know that's a big issue too. I'm talking about methods. What research methods do I choose? Imagine you're not writing a thesis in business. You're writing a thesis in philosophy. You're writing a thesis in classical philosophy of ancient Greece. You're not going to go knocking on doors of businesses to answer the question that you might have about the classical philosophy of ancient Greece. It'll be a theoretical thesis where you read a lot of theory, so your method will generally be theoretical. But take the other example, you're writing a thesis about a new business model at an airport, right? And you want to find out for that airport, with that airport, whether this business model is effective. How will you do it? You will have to do some kind of empirical research. You'll have to go to the airport, look at their process, understand it, describe it, and evaluate it. And evaluate it in a way which is, of course, meaningful and gives you good results. You might have to do the interviews that Professor Althaus talked about. You might have to do surveys of all different kinds. You might have to look at numbers. You might have to look at business results. But the how comes directly out of the what. So to give you an example from my example, I went to the ICC in Paris and conducted research about a student competition on mediation which they had there. And they wanted to know whether there were cultural parameters in this competition which affected the results. To put it very simply, were the winners all white men? Right? That was the simple question behind their research question. And so that was my job. I was fascinated by it. I was interested in it personally. It gave me an intellectual challenge because I was interested in the theory of cross-cultural communication. But it also had direct effects on my methods. How can I find this out? Of course, I had to go and observe, watch the process. I had to read all the documentation about the process, understand the process, and I did 2 kinds of survey. I did both the qualitative and quantitative survey that you talked about, or one of you did. You talked about, Ulf. I did both. I did the qualitative survey in terms of talking to key agents in the process in depth, and I did the qualitative survey with a simple questionnaire with questions I designed to find my answers with 300 people. That's the how. The how comes directly from the what. If you can define the what clearly, then you can define the how. And my recommendation to you would be before you start writing, whoever asked this question, before you start writing, answer those 3 questions. What, why, how? What and why and how is the global, the big picture. Here's a kind of checklist for what you might need to think about when you're preparing a thesis. And the question is, contents and evaluation of a master's thesis, what might it look like? Formulate a topic, and the topic should have a clear research proposal or question. That's why it's called a thesis.
If I may?
Yeah, with pleasure. Yep.
Give some idea between the relationship of topic and title.
Yep.
One thing is the title of your master thesis is a personal marketing tool for you.
Yes.
Because it shows what you are aspiring to be an expert in, what you're good at, what you want to do with your life in the next years. And so your title could be like the solution to all the problems in the world. Right? That would be a good title from a marketing perspective. On the other hand, what you promise in the title, you have to deliver.
Yep.
You may deliver more, but it would not be a very good idea to deliver less. And so the promise you make in the title should be a promise that can be easily fulfilled. And that, of course, is a contradiction. So what most people doing in their thesis work, and that's a recommendation of most supervisors, is that you have a title, big one, and a subtitle which focuses on a special part which you can easily manage in 3 or 4 months' time. That would be like solution, or our solution to all problems. And then you have a subtitle like case study, the problem of shoestrings, which might go broke. And so you have a case study, men's shoes, strings, brown ones, for the right foot. And so you have a very good marketing title and a small subtitle, and you would be able to fulfill something. This promise, for example, your solution could be wear monk straps. Okay. Second remark goes in the same direction. Also, recommendation most supervisors will follow is that you think of your work looking at the letter T, like in Thomas, meaning that you should give an overview of your topic, why it is relevant, where does it connect to other fields of interest. For example, as Greg Bond said, we are looking at airport curfews. We're not allowed to fly at night. Why is this so? What is the situation in the world, in Germany, United States, Asia? What are general experience? And then you make an in-depth analysis of one, for example, case study, like situation at Berlin airport, and then you can go into the specifics. That's mostly a problem for air cargo, blah, 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 blah. Because your master thesis then will show, will prove, will demonstrate that you're really able to do everything which is relevant in this field because you prove it with this probe here. And if we see from university side that you're able to do it here, well, we are confident you'll always will also be able to do it there, but you don't have to do it in your master thesis. And so this letter T is a good way to make this clear in your work plan and your structure. And then, of course, you get to the research questions. If you say, I want to know the commercial or economic consequences in the Berlin situation, for example, and then you can go on. Then the third thing is, if you put your research question or questions, maximum 3, put them on a piece of paper, big letters, print it out, and hang it up above your computer screen, right? On your desk, where you see it every day. And if you're writing your thesis or doing research or reading something, you can always look at this question, the research question, and then you can reflect what I'm doing right now, what I'm writing right now, what I'm reading right now. Does it contribute to the answer to this question? And if that says no, well, skip it. And then you save a lot of time, and then you have time management.
That's wonderful. The next point would be the length of a thesis. That is dependent on the institution. Yeah? Normally we say about 60 pages, which is of course depending on the institution. At the WIT, what do you require, Franziska?
No, we don't have a clear requirement, but there's some experience which said that the good master thesis is somewhere in the area 60 to 80 pages, but you shouldn't write to reach 60 or 70 pages, but if you think you're finished, you have everything, and you only have 22 pages, probably something is missing. And if you're on page 122 and still in your introduction, you probably did not find your focus.
That's right. So what I would recommend is,
sometimes, but it depends a bit on me, because it depends a bit on the type you are. And I often say less is more. Yeah. Concentrate more, and it's not necessary to reach 100 pages. Yes, to focus is very important, and to be able to concentrate and to use clear sentences, and then sometimes less is more, because we don't have the problem to find information, because due to the internet, getting information is not the problem, but to decide which information is relevant, which information is of high quality, that's very important. And together with the letter on the wall, yes, the key sentence, the research question, and the short sentence, less is more, you find the right measure.
Referencing. I'm going to move on now to the big question of referencing, academic standards in English, referencing in English, how many references, etc. Not so much how many, but a few guidelines on how to do it. And I'm coming back to the simple structure, why, how. It's the same again. Why do we reference? So that your reader can find the source if he or she is interested. That's the fourth reason. Yeah? He or she can go to a library or go on the internet and find it. And that will lead you straight to the question of how, in such a way that the reader can find it. So incomplete references are a problem, because the reader cannot find it. There are many different referencing systems, and there are academic style guides. I've listed 4 academic style guides here. The Harvard Referencing System, the Chicago Manual of Style, the APA, American Psychological Association, and the MHRA Style Guide. And they're all very useful, but far too complicated for what you need at master's thesis level. They all contain much more information than you will ever need. But nonetheless, they could give you the standard guidelines. And a simplified form of any one of these is fine. The question that students will often ask is there a Wildau system? And the answer is, no, there isn't. Right? There is no system that we would recommend to all students at Wildau or all students in the WIT. This is what you have to do. And so this, again, is a question I would ask the supervisor right in the first meeting. What's the best referencing system for my work? Do you have any recommendations? Or even, do you have any preferences? Most supervisors will say, I have neither a recommendation nor a preference. What I want is a consistent referencing style which makes sense. What information must a reference contain? The answer to this question is everything the reader needs to find it. Right? So if you have a quotation, it should contain not just the source in terms of the book or article, or if it's an internet reference, the main homepage of the URL, it should contain the page number. Right? It should go right down to the level of page number. And if it's an internet source, and I had a problem with an essay that I was reading last week from students where it was an internet source, and I got the URL, let's say it was the BBC, bbc.co.uk. And I went to bbc.co.uk. What do I find? I find the homepage. Did I find the quote? No, because the quote is on a subpage. So whatever you do, ask yourself, will my reader find this? How to reference. There's basically two systems, and one of the systems has a subsystem. The first system is the author-date referencing system, which I like. And that's the Harvard system, if you like, or the APA system, where in the text you have a bracket, and in the brackets you put your reference. So it might be Biermann, 2012, page 24. And that's a reference to a work by Professor Thomas Biermann. Of course, you're now sliming. Yeah? You're now quoting your professor, that's fine. Yeah? And that will then be, at the back of the thesis, there'll be a full bibliographical entry with this work. Professor Biermann, The Art of Tying Shoelaces, yeah, Harvard, 2004. Or we can have a footnote or endnote system. For master's thesis, I would recommend, if you're going to use notes, use footnotes. I would recommend not to use endnotes. Footnotes are more reader-friendly. Yeah? A reader will see at the bottom of the page, this is the reference, and doesn't have to leaf through 20 pages to the end of the thesis. So there are footnotes or endnotes, but I recommend footnotes. So either this author-date referencing system or footnotes. What are the strengths and weaknesses of each? What are the strengths of the author-date system? It's elegant and simple. Right? It's elegant and simple. There are no footnotes. It's very easy to manage. You don't have to worry about formatting footnotes. That's a strength in terms of your time management. That's a strength in terms of you as a writer. What are the strengths of the footnote system? It gives the reader a lot of information on the same page. Yeah? And the reader doesn't have to leaf to the back to a bibliography to find out more details about this publication. What are the disadvantages? The same. The author-date system doesn't give the reader the information immediately on the page. He or she has to go to the back. Right? And the footnote system is a little bit more difficult to manage in terms of your work management. Both of them, in my view, are legitimate and fine. But then again, there are some specialities or academic fields which will not accept the author-date system. I think if you're writing about law and you have a lot of reference to commentaries on the law, you're going to have to use footnotes, right? If you have a lot of complicated references, all with the same name and the same date, and that could happen, then use the footnote system. The author-date system only works if it's fairly simple. So there are differences, but they're technical. Okay? How much information do I include in a footnote? The answer is as much as is needed for your reader to find the source. Simple as that. That's why we're doing it. How do I deal with repeat references? There's information in the handout on this. There are various ways. One is to use the complete title again and just repeat it in completion again. Another is to use a short title. And another is to use a short title. And then if it's 20 pages later in your thesis, in brackets, see note 7. So you're referring back to the note. This is only relevant for the footnote system. For the Harvard system or the APA system, the bracket system, it's very simple. You just continue with the bracket system. What's the difference between quotation and paraphrase and plagiarism? This is really important. And again, very important to get this right. Quotation is in quotation marks. Paraphrase is simply saying, this is what the author argues, in your own words. Plagiarism is quoting without quotation marks. And that can happen at a very simple level that's not even intentional. I had a student who read the autobiography of Steve Jobs and wrote a thesis about Steve Jobs' management style, thinking it might be a model that people would emulate. Wonderful topic. I was happy with it as a topic. And unfortunately, the student quoted from the biography of Steve Jobs extensively, and she referenced it every time. There were footnotes, but she did not put the quotes in quotation marks. And I could see immediately this was not this student's English. How do I deal with quotations in other languages? I had a student, poor guy, only bachelor's, so it's not a problem. He's learning. That's what it's about. A couple of weeks ago, who used the German book, the biography of Pep Guardiola, the football manager. He used it in an essay. Fine. If it's relevant, fine. You know, if it's relevant, use it. And of course, it's called Pep Guardiola Die Biographie in German. His bibliography called it Pep Guardiola, the biography. So he translated the title for me. And of course, that's wrong. Why? Because as a reader, I will never find that book. It doesn't exist. That book does not exist. And it's the same with quotations. If you have a source in Turkish, which you might have, right? And you want to quote it in your thesis, it's absolutely fine. Of course you can do that. But your reader doesn't read Turkish. How do you deal with it? And there are two ways. One way is to quote it in Turkish and then provide a translation, perhaps in brackets or in a footnote. That's a method I would recommend if you don't have to do it frequently. Maybe there's only 2 or 3 cases in your thesis where you have to translate. Then it's okay. If you have a lot of material to translate, I would recommend that you translate it yourself, but then acknowledge in your footnote, and you'll have to use a footnote system if you do this, the author date system will not work, that you've translated it. And you write translated from. There's one I would like to answer now, because it hasn't been answered yet, and that is, how do I write about myself? Yeah? How can I say I? And my answer is, if you're working with me, the answer is yes, you can say I. I would never encourage people to write about themselves as the author. The author thinks. That's not good English style. In German, it may be possible to write about yourself as der Verfasser or die Verfasserin, but in English, it's not good style. But there are ways of avoiding the word I, which I would also recommend you think about, and one is the passive. Use the passive voice. Instead of saying, I cannot think of a passive, or simply use an objective formulation. Instead of saying, I think this argument, Professor Biermann's argument on tying shoelaces is a load of nonsense, you say, this argument is flawed because. It's still clear that you're thinking that. That's the passive, is flawed. This argument is mistaken. This argument is outdated. Yeah? This argument has weaknesses. Use a more objective formulation. On the other hand, there may be moments where it's absolutely necessary to use the word I. Yeah? For the purpose of this thesis, I interviewed 6 experts. I have absolutely no problems with that. Yeah? It would be crazy to say the author interviewed 6 experts. Of course, we want theses which are readable and well written. This does not mean that we want theses which are written as if Shakespeare had written them. Right? That's not what it means. We will accept stylistic blunders if they're not too frequent. We will accept the odd spelling mistake too, if they're not too frequent, right? So that's the first tip I would give you. The second tip I would give you is if you're writing in English, do your research in English, unless there's a good reason not to. The most difficult thing is translating, and I'm not talking about translating quotations, but translating the material you've looked at from German or another language to English. So if you're writing in English, choose a topic that comes right back to the beginning of our class today. Choose a topic which makes it easier to write in English. Don't choose something where you know there isn't going to be any material in English and it's going to be difficult to find that. And then the third thing is, you can do training, academic writing, which John O'Donoghue offers here at this university, other people offer at other places. That's not feasible for everybody, I know. No, not everybody has the time. And it won't solve all your problems either, but it will give you some tips. But nonetheless, when you're reading academic literature, read it with 2 eyes and ears. The first one is, of course, is this relevant to my topic? Is it helping me? And the second one is, what kind of formulation is being used here that I might like to copy in my thesis? And that's not copying in terms of plagiarism. That's copying in terms of good academic style. How does this author write? And what is he or she using that could be useful? Right? And the fourth thing, of course, is get someone to help you. It won't be your supervisor. He or she will not correct your English. If I'm supervising a student and they send an expose, I might give that student 3 or 4 tips based on the English of the expose to say, these are things in your English which you can change. Take a look at them, and I will always choose those things which I think will come up again, those things which will happen again, and that can help you. And otherwise, you all have the world out there with friends, colleagues who might be able to help you, and get the thesis proofread. It doesn't have to be proofread by a professional proofreader, but at least someone from your friends, acquaintances, colleagues who can read English. That's another tip. Yeah? I would wish you all the best with your master's theses, whenever they're coming. I know for some of you it's only next year, and for some of you it might be in the future. Wish you all the best. I hope you have a good start. How can I start? I hope the answer is well, yeah, with a clear question and a lot of passion and excitement, and then it'll work. Thank you very much.
Ich fange jetzt an mit meinem Thesis zu schreiben. Ich habe kein Thema gefunden und diese kleinen Tipps und Tricks kann ich dann mitnehmen. Was so wichtig für mich ist, Organisation, Struktur und auch wie viele Stunden ungefähr muss ich dann arbeiten. Ich weiß, es ist ein bisschen schwierig, aber jetzt habe ich eine Idee und ja, das hilft auf jeden Fall.
Äußerst hilfreich, weil man hat doch immer das Problem mit den akademischen Stilen, die es da gibt, im Deutschen und im Englischen, und das mischt sich manchmal durcheinander, sodass es durchaus hilfreich war, zu wissen, was man eigentlich hier will und was man erwartet und man eine klare Orientierung hat.
Ja, also das war sehr hilfreich. Also man konnte wieder einen kleinen Fresh Start, also zu wissen, okay, wie kann ich angehen, was sind die wichtigen Sachen zu beachten, von vornherein, nicht, dass es zu spät kommt. Also ich fand es sehr, sehr produktiv. Auch den Austausch mit anderen Studenten, die gleiche Fragen haben. Keine Frage ist dumme Fragen, sondern es sind alle wichtige Fragen und die besser jetzt klären als später.